Thank you so much, Stephen, for joining me, and welcome to my first Know, Grow, and Scale audiocast and podcast. I'm excited to have you today. You were my first call, so I don't know if you should feel good about that or wonder if there's anybody else that is a sucker for getting on a video cast with me. But I kind of just want to walk my listeners through, the whole purpose of the podcast, like we talked about, is just to interview people who have been there and done that. And I got the pleasure and the honor of watching you grow SmartSynch. I know you've moved on to bigger and better things since then, but if you will, just talk about, your background, and then I want to get into specifics about SmartSynch and growing that business, but specifically your background and then also what you're doing now a little bit.
Great. Well, thanks for having me, Laura. It's a pleasure to be your first podcast interview. And so it's an honor and I'll remember it forever. So thank you for doing that. And I sure do miss working with you every day. But, it's the life of an entrepreneur is an incredible journey. And, I've had clearly some moments that have been great and other moments where, I felt like I was the only person on the planet standing there. And I think that's very typical of anybody that wants to particularly get into technology or innovation or commit to that type of business. It's hard, and but it's fun and it's very rewarding, and you get to work and meet great people like you. So, from a background standpoint, I always tell people I'm an investment banker. So, that was my first job out of college. When I graduated from Ole Miss, I ended up in a great place in Charlotte, North Carolina. And, anytime people ask me, how I got in technology, I always start with, well, I'm an investment banker that, happened to take a chance on an opportunity that I thought sounded great. And I'll tell you that investment banking background really did prepare me, though, for a lot of the things that I would see as an entrepreneur as I was building the business, because I saw so many different businesses and how they operated. And I learned so much from, good CEOs, and then also watching some businesses that didn't do well. And, you can learn from all your experiences. So my background is investment banking. I just happened to get in the technology business, make a leap of faith in 2000 when we started SmartSynch in Jackson, Mississippi. And I had no idea what the future would hold, but it was it certainly was different than what I thought it would be. I would tell you that. So
yeah. So start to finish. So we'll talk a little bit about what you're doing now, and then I want to hear start to finish. How long were you at SmartSynch?
Yeah, so I was there we started in 2000, and I sold the business in 2012. So 12 years. 8 of those as CEO, the last 8, the first 4 not in that role. And then I stayed on with the acquirer for 3 years after that. Itron bought the company in 2012, and I stayed with them for 3 years. And so, it was just a great journey. Honestly, I never thought I would be there that long, to be candid with you. When I started in 2000, it was real in vogue for investment bankers to leave and go work for a technology business and then sell it within 12 to 18 months and then make a bunch of money and then do something else for the rest of their life. And I'll be honest with you, that's what I thought was going to happen to me.
That was the plan. Yeah.
That was the plan.
Is it correct? You went in a marketing role?
Is that right? It was my first title with the company actually was Director of Investor Relations. And as a young tech company, there's really no investor relations person. So I think I gave myself that title. I don't know. We had 6 people when I started, and or 6 people in the United States. There was a business in Canada that we worked closely with that was part of the company, but it was a separate entity. But I was one of the first 6 in the United States. And, we started in a 1,200 square foot house. And I tell people across the street from a Mexican restaurant where I ate often. And, I sat in the lobby or the foyer of the home where the fax machine was. And I think I sat in a chair right beside it on my first day of work. And, I'll never forget just
humble beginnings.
Yeah. Humble beginnings.
You see all those pictures of the Dell headquarters and the Amazon headquarters. And it's the same thing. You've got people that, have a piece of paper that says Amazon sticking to the wall, and that was it.
That's it, and it's interesting. I mean, everything, when you start something from scratch, it's, people want to look at these big companies that have been really successful over the past 20 years, like an Amazon or Dell or whoever it might be. And what you see is, what it looks like later. But if those people, dialed it back and showed you what it looked like in the very beginning, I imagine most startups, most of them look very similar.
Right.
People coming to work every day, trying to innovate and come up with an idea, and just trying to find a way to be successful. And
Yeah.
and that's what we were at SmartSync. And
Yeah. That's good to remember too. I think for those, especially those of us that, are have been in business for a long time, but just getting their start, in business. I think that's important. And how long
absolutely,
you said you were in that role, the investor relations role, and how did you get to become CEO? How did
yeah,
that happen?
well, so it's a very interesting dynamic. And, here's what happens in a startup or any kind of new business. There's really no roles that are exclusive unless you're writing code, which
Right.
a lot of people do. And I was not a code writer. As a matter of fact, after the very first day of work, I remember the CTO at the time went to lunch, and I didn't have anybody to go to lunch with. I didn't even know the people I was really working with very well. I knew the CEO, but nobody asked me to go
Right.
to lunch on the first day. And they came back from lunch, and he hands me a book. It was one of those Cliff Notes books, and it said "Software for Dummies." And he said, "Hey, you may want to read this before you come back tomorrow." And I did. I went home and I read it, and I learned a lot
Yeah.
about what a Java bean was, and all these
Right.
things. But
Right.
but that was my
It
first
wasn't
exposure
coffee.
to
It wasn't coffee.
software, right? And I mean, and literally that's how I got started. And so,
Yeah.
but what happens in a startup is, I think people who are really successful in startups can play multiple roles in a company. And so, where I would see a need as we would grow, I would just jump in and say, "Hey, I'll fill that role." And so, I really acted like a CFO on the very beginning. That was my background, finance, and so I understood
Right.
that. But I'll tell you, the funny thing about SmartSync was we had just raised $8 million. I told the CEO I wouldn't come work for him until he had enough capital in the bank to at least pay me for a year. And he raised $8 million. We had a great group of investors, and so I started. Well, within about 2 weeks, I ran our first projection model, and during those times, VCs were just funding companies based on ideas. That nobody was running projections and things like that. They were, but nobody paid attention to them. It was a hot market. And so what I figured out was, at the rate we were spending money, we'd be out of money in a year. So I went to the CEO and I said, "Hey, we need to go raise another round of capital." And he said, "What are you talking about?" I said, "Oh, well, we're going to run out in about 6 months." And so I showed him the financial model, and he said, "Shoot, well, we're spending too much money." I said, "Yes." And so I quickly changed my title, I think, to director of finance. And so
Right.
basically I built the financial projection model, and then I changed my title to,
Congratulations.
yeah, then I changed my title to, director of business development or VP of business development or something. And then
Mhm.
went out and raised our first round of capital that we closed 1 year later, which is a $23 million round that you really put the company in solid footing for the future. And so, and so that's what I did for the first year that I was at the company.
Yeah.
Um, which is funny because it was really the only thing I knew how to do, which was raise
Right.
capital. So that's what I did. So
Right. Right. You play to your strengths. That's right.
absolutely.
So, can we talk about just because I really want to focus on the three elements like we've talked about: know, grow,
Yeah.
and scale. Knowing the business is, having a brand that suits you, having the messaging that suits you. When you went to SmartSync, the logo was already in place, the branding, or did you do a
No.
redesign? Okay.
Yeah. So
Talk about that, like when you decided on the name and
yeah.
what.
Well, there's a couple of really important points there. One is, this concept of knowing what you're doing and where you're going is very important. And, it- in today's world, and I'm very guilty of this today, I like to get to the solution very quickly.
Yep.
And I think a lot of companies fail because they don't spend enough time understanding what the real problem is that they're trying to solve, and validating that that problem actually exists, and that whatever it is that they're creating or building is going to help make that better. And
Right.
so everybody wants to jump to the solution, and like I
I
said,
said it for
guilty.
myself. Yeah,
Yeah,
I know.
guilty is charged
Yeah,
because it's a lot more
yeah.
fun to talk about the solution than it
Right,
is the problem.
right,
Okay.
right.
But it's in SmartSync's case, and by the way, we were called XP Technology at the time, and
Thank you.
Microsoft had not released their XP brand of operating system yet, and so we probably should have held on to the name and tried to cut some deal with Microsoft later, and would have been worth a lot of money. But we
Coulda, woulda, shoulda. Yeah.
yeah, and in all honesty, I felt like the name was okay, but I didn't think it really gave us a big enough presence to a big enough vision. I didn't like the name. I didn't think it was great, and so actually, I did initiate a name change. So I guess I was the director of marketing too,
Right.
and so. But what I did was I brought in some really smart people, and I said, "Hey, can you help us?" And I will tell you that at that time, we were playing around with what do we call our product, and so everybody that was in the industry and dealing with the problems that we were trying to solve, they were talking about the product that we ultimately created as an advanced meter, and we wanted something different. We said, hey, we're going to build a new technology, which I can go into what it did, but basically it's a wireless smart meter. And we felt like we needed to change the name from advanced meter so we could be different. So we actually came up with the name smart meter, and
Okay.
we filed a trademark registration for that name. And ultimately, we're told that we wouldn't get it about 4 years later. But that's because everybody else in the industry started calling their product smart meter after we launched our product. So it was a very successful name. And
Right.
then we came up with SmartSync just because we were synchronizing the meters to the network, and it
Right.
made sense. And
Right.
we couldn't get the .com on SYNC, so we
How
named
did
it
that?
Smart SYNCH,
Yep.
and .com because we could get that URL. So I mean, these really thoughtful things that you do to
Yeah.
create a product, but it ended up being a great name.
But I will say, I think that is something that when you say you get ahead of yourself and you want to, a lot of times CEOs want to do the flashy stuff. Well, really stopping to think about your logo and brand reflecting what you do. A lot of times people don't take the time to do that. And then they start launching, if you don't have the conversation with the right people in the room about, okay, this is what we're doing now, but what do we want to do in 10 years? Then you start naming yourself something that's not going to reflect what you want to do. And then you get yourself 5 years down the road and have to lose brand equity because you're rebranding or whatever. And it's a real, it's a real challenge I think a lot of people don't think about. So I'm glad
Well,
that you guys
you
went through that.
definitely want to get it right on the front end. And I had I had some really good marketing help from, some friends of mine that, Campbell McCool, actually was real
Yeah.
involved in that name
Yeah.
selection process. And so, but, kind of back to your knowing thing, it's important to have a name. It's important to, have a brand, and you want to, you don't want to redo it. So you want to get it right on the front end, or at least commit to it. But it's also important to know the market that you're trying to
Right.
address. And I think for SmartSync, we were building something, and initially, it was we knew that we could help utilities save money, but we had not quantified that yet. And so, after we actually raised our first, round of capital, we spent an enormous amount of time, defining what that problem was and really understanding the market we were trying to address. And then, building the value story for our customers of why it made sense to use what we were building versus what they were doing today. And I just can't emphasize enough how important it is to really understand the market that you're selling into. And I thought we did that very well at SmartSync, which was one of our keys to success down the road.
Right. Okay, let's talk about the grow phase. So, when you think about growing a business, really the growth phase is when the most conflict happens, in my opinion.
Yeah,
You're adding people, which with people come conflict,
absolutely.
and you're trying to hire the right people, which I know you win some, you lose some. We've talked about that before. But you're also trying to figure out your product mix and what you're selling and what's going to work and what's not. Your sales team, who's going to be productive, because you could have a 5-star salesperson who comes in to sell your set of products and it just doesn't work, So, talk about product challenges, sales challenges. And, when I talk about growth in terms of marketing, I really think about, getting that next step of, product materials or branding the
Yeah.
product instead of branding the logo. And, you can speak to that if you want to, but I kind of want to more dig into like, what are some of those challenges you faced in the growth phase of the company at SmartSync?
Yeah, well, keeping with the theme of what are you going to do next? After we raised our first round of capital, one of our board members said, "Hey, now that you got this money in the bank, what are you going to do?" They asked me directly, and I said, "I don't know. Maybe I'd take a vacation. Since I've been working, for a year." And and he said, and it's funny, he said, I had never really thought about it. And he said, "Well, look, I think you would be." You need to get involved in the marketing and the sales side of the business, And I said, okay, great. And actually, I ended up going to Kellogg for a course in marketing, an executive course in marketing, which really opened my eyes to a lot of, marketing strategies that I'd not really that I didn't know about in my previous roles because it had primarily been financial. And so I actually ended up, taking over marketing and sales with a company in my second year, and which was great. But in terms of challenges, we were building a product, and so when you're innovating and creating a product, first of all, you got to make sure the product works, and so you spend a lot of time, just you don't want to go sell too early, is what I'm trying to say, because
Right.
you want to. Anytime you introduce anything new, you're going to run into challenges. And so what's important on the front end of this grow process is that, you have customers that are what we call relational customers, people that want to, that believe in what you're doing, that understand the value that you're creating, that are willing to maybe not be so regimented about how they treat you as a vendor. You're really
Yeah.
looking for those early adopter partner companies. And at SmartSync, that's what we did. And we found 2 to 3 of them. They were big utilities. We got to them through, various relationships. We leveraged that's really important, to leverage every relationship you can.
Mhm.
And those early adopter customers, the first version of our product, I don't even think it worked, to be honest with you. I think we shipped it and it didn't work, but they didn't want to tell
Giving it
anybody it didn't work.
away from
Yeah,
a little bit more than a
right. So
little
they
bit
were
more.
like, "Hey, I don't think your product's working," So we said, "Oh, well, let us fix it," so we'd fix it or whatever and send it back.
That's
And
huge.
well, it is. You want to, in that early stages of growth, you know, not growing too fast, too early is really important,
Yeah.
because the worst thing you can do is to grow too fast and then have a product that fails,
Yeah.
and not having customers that, really are buying into what your vision, and understanding that you're delivering something that's new and different. So, and this really applies to, new technology, and, I'm
Right.
sure it's the same in other industries. But anyway, the point being that those challenges early on is just, when you have those first customers, they're your first customers. So you don't have any experience, implementing the software, you know, uh, making sure it works, doing all those things. You do everything you can up front, but there's nothing like that real experience. And
Yeah.
so, with my current company, which we can talk about at the end, what
Yeah.
we're doing right now is, we're building those systems and processes so that we can scale when we're ready.
Right.
And I just think it's really important to get them, to have a few, trial runs, to have a few early customers. Don't go sell to everybody, don't go grab
Right
the
on.
whole market on the beginning, because you may find out that, that was not the best thing for your business.
Right.
Perfect the product, and
Yeah,
and
and
grow from
that's
there.
important too in hiring because if you decided, okay, we got $23 million, let's go hire 8 salespeople, and you have a product that doesn't work,
Right.
then you're
Or
wasted.
you
Yeah.
can't tell them how to articulate the value proposition for the customer, or you can't tell them how, or you don't have contracts that are acceptable to your customer base. That's a really big issue. And
Right.
so getting your contracting system down, figuring out, what your pricing is,
Right.
understanding, and those early customers will help you figure out how you need to price your product to make money,
Right.
because we're all in the business to ultimately generate a profit for our investors and our shareholders. But a
Right.
lot of times, and guilty as charged, We
Yeah.
think that we know what the cost of a product is, but we don't really know until we've sold it, until we've implemented it. And so, just really taking your time to understand all those on the front end of that growing process is just critical to success in my mind.
Right. And the last thing you want to do is give, again, the 8 salespeople you just hired with your $23 million a price that's not an actual,
Right.
that's not making you any money. And then they're all selling it and expecting commission on something that's, you're in the hole.
That's right. And I'll tell you, great salespeople love defined parameters. And so, what they want to do is leverage their relationships, go close deals. That's who they are. And so you will be most successful if you can give them a toolkit that will allow them to go do that and not have to think about, oh, did we price our product right? Or, man, shoot, our product's not working well, or can we scale? So you want to, these companies, they have gates. I always look at them as like gates to go through. And so for us at SmartSynch, we had all this money and we started hiring people, but by the way, we realized we were building the wrong product, and so, and what happened was, we had launched a product on a network it was the SkyTel digital narrowband PCS network.
Yeah.
Well, what we figured out, as we got in, we built a very successful product. I mean, it worked perfectly. It was, performing very well. But, like every week we get a call from the manufacturer of the cellular technology, and they'd say, hey, that part's going end of life. You need to make your last time buy. I was like, what are you talking about, end of life? I think at this point in time, I was probably, overseeing some part of the, manufacturing process too. And I was like, well,
director of product development or something.
Well, whatever. You just take on whatever role. I
Right.
took on any role I could get. And the biggest role I took on actually was, I ran customer service. So I picked up marketing, sales, and I picked up customer service. And so you start dealing with product issues. They're like, oh, well, we can't deliver you that product because we don't have enough components or whatever. And we were in the hardware, software, and service business. So the hardware side of the business, I learned a lot about that, and I'd never been exposed to that before, and it was very challenging. But here's the point: we realized, relatively in our second or third year, that the long-term future of the core network that we were working on wasn't going to be around.
Yeah.
And so we had to make a product change. The value proposition was still the same. So we switched to cellular, and that ultimately ended up being the right decision because, everybody in the world is, using cellular devices. And so cellular worked out well. But my point is, how far into
the business was that decision made?
I'm going to say that was 3 years into the company. So we had sold a lot of the paging solutions by then with our early adopter customers, which were, pretty big utilities throughout the United States. We had sold a lot of product to them, and it was working great. But what was happening is the ability to expand and grow that product was in jeopardy because. So what we ultimately did was we ended up buying a division of Motorola that made the product, and so we brought it in house. And we did that because we had the money. If we wouldn't have had the capital, we wouldn't have been able to do that. So we bought that division, and we managed the wind down of that technology ourselves, as opposed to relying on a third party, while we built a cellular version of our product. And so, what I would tell entrepreneurs today is, you literally have to expect unexpected at all times, because nobody would have ever forecasted that of happening. But you have to be able to pivot, when something doesn't go your way, man. It doesn't mean that it's the end of the road. You just got to make a pivot.
I think that's a good testimony too. 3 years in, you think 3 years in is pretty substantial in the life of a startup,
Absolutely.
And that's a big pivot, but it ended up being, it almost is like you just leapfrogged over, what could have been end of life, and it could have drained you after 5 years, or whatever.
No doubt. The point is that, every company is going to face challenges, and when you enter that growth phase, though, you want to be locked and loaded and ready to go. That's the best advice I can give someone. So you want to have your marketing assets down. You want to have your contracting stuff down. You want to have your system and processes down. So when you hit the gas pedal, you're ready to expand and grow and take advantage of every opportunity that comes your way, because it can, once you start experiencing a little bit of success, it's amazing how quickly it can come upon you in much greater opportunities than what you even thought you would have.
And you have to be ready. So so that kind of moves us into scale. So was there any defining moment for you where you're like, this business is going to work? Or, when you realize, hey, we've got, and I know nothing was perfect, but you kind of did get to the point, I felt like, because I know I was there for this part, you get to the point where people are buying this and it's working, and, it's not perfect, but it's working, and it's actually going to it's a, proven concept. The industry knows about us, et cetera, et cetera. So was there any certain point? I feel like I know when it was, but I'd love to know, like, at what point did you feel like, okay, this is really happening?
Well, we went through I became CEO in my fourth year, which was, I was 32 years old. And, at that point in time, I think 35 million had been invested in the business. I'm sure the investors were like, we're turning over this business to a 32-year-old. They were, or 30, maybe I was 34. I can't remember. I think I was 34. And I'm sure they were like, what are we doing? But now it's very common, for technology CEOs to be very young and whatever. But at that time, it really was not. I think I never doubted that the business was going to be successful. And I think that's a very important element of, as an entrepreneur, you have to be your biggest advocate. Okay. Yeah. And when you're going to have moments where you're down and you think things are not going to work, and you're scared, or you're nervous, or you're afraid, or whatever. It's just natural. It's human nature. With that being said, I think resiliency is the best characteristic of an entrepreneur. And, I'm a very resilient person. And so anytime we would have a setback, I would always try to turn it into a positive, and try to say, okay, well, this didn't work, but, we're going to do this now. And I never said, oh, we're dead. And what I will tell you, though, is the defining moment for me was when the customers that we had, early on started placing additional orders. Yeah. And so, what you find is when people start, placing additional orders, they're starting to believe in what you're delivering, and your product must be having value for them, or they wouldn't be buying more.
Right.
And so I think that initial, winning those second orders with the customers, that to me made me feel like, man, we really have built something that has potential.
Trust. Yeah. The trust too, knowing that somebody trusts you that much, that's sure big. Well, so if you, just to kind of start to wrap up, but I still have some things I want to talk through. If you could attribute the success of SmartSynch to one thing, what would it be?
Well, look, that's an easy answer for me. It's all about people, and it doesn't matter in any business that you're in. You're only as good as the people that are around you. And, I think vision, I think, knowing the problem, I think understanding how to grow, I think all those things are great and really important to achieving success. But at the end of the day, one person can't do everything. You have to build a team of people so that you can scale and grow. And we were just really fortunate to have, really good people at SmartSynch that believed in the vision and that had the capabilities to execute. Yeah. Now, I'll tell you, we add a lot of people. I mean, both, higher level people, lower level people. I mean, we're constantly adding people to the mix. And, one of the greatest or most important characteristic of people, I think, inside of technology, particularly startup companies, is to, be able to leverage new people into the business. And so, like, we would make a hire, and, my goal was to hire the smartest people I could find, and we would bring these people into the business. Well, some people would be like, oh, well, this guy's on, he's on my kitchen, or, she's, taking responsibility that used to be mine, or whatever it is. Right. And I think if you have that mindset, you're going to miss it.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
because your success is really dependent upon the people that you bring in, and you have to leverage everybody's strengths to be
Yeah.
able to be successful.
And there's room for everybody at the table. I think,
Absolutely.
one thing you won't say, but it's something that I observed was I think that another thing that attributed to the success of SmartSync was your authenticity. And I think just as having worked at multiple places, I think that having a leader that is not afraid to admit failure or, stand up in front of a group and say really hard things or, whatever. I mean, I think that's kind of what made us a family. And, something I really, although I've worked at really great places, and I think most people that worked at SmartSync would agree, like there was something really special about SmartSync. And I think a lot of it had to do with the fact that we went through some really high highs together and some really low lows together. And you never tried to pretend that bad things didn't exist because, it wasn't perfect and you weren't perfect. And I think that really helped too.
Well,
You know,
I really
it's like a
appreciate that.
marriage. Like you said, when you're
Well, it
committed,
is.
like if you stay committed to it, you're going to have great days and you're going to have bad days. And that commitment is a big part of it.
Well, I appreciate that, and I do think an important um, aspect of being successful is being transparent.
Yeah.
And so I've always tried to be open and honest and communicate often. And, I'm not the best in the world at doing it. I just I do my best. I never want to sugarcoat anything. I just want to be direct because, we all bet our families and careers and our life on these opportunities. And so,
Right.
I respect that. And I just feel like, being direct and honest and open about things is important, whether if it's good things or bad things. But I'll tell you a funny story, just real quickly. I'll never forget, one of my largest shareholder, I had not met the chairman of that company. And I was really excited, just become CEO. And he had sent me or called me and said, "Hey, I'm going to come to Jackson and meet with you." And so I was just super excited to meet this guy. He was very successful, and he was the chairman of the group that was our largest shareholder. And and so he came in and we were having a great lunch, and he was said, "Tell me about your business." I was telling him all about it and how we were growing and thanking him for, his support. And after lunch, he said, "Well, hey man, this has been a fascinating lunch." He said, "I tell you what, I'll call you tomorrow and let you know if we're going to keep your business open." And I stopped for a minute. I said, "What do you mean?" He said, "Well, we have two portfolio companies left. We don't have the resources to support both of them. So we're going to close one and keep one open. And I'll let you know tomorrow if it's going to be you or not."
Oh, wow.
And what was, it just really took me by surprise. I was
Yeah.
like, "Wow,
Yeah.
well, what do you mean? What do you like about what I
Yeah.
just said?"
Yeah.
Luckily he called me the next day and said, "Hey, listen, man, we're going to go forward with you guys. We love what you're doing. And so look
Wow.
forward to being a part of your growth." And so it worked out great. But here's the thing. You, you're going to have curveballs. You're going to have things that are thrown your way, and you rely on those people to be able to handle the situations that are faced with the company. And so I just think it's really important to surround yourself with the smartest and best, brightest people you can
Right.
find. So,
That's right. Well, talk a little bit about what you're doing now. I feel like you took us through the SmartSync journey, and I want to hear more
yeah,
about. I know, but I'd love for everybody to know what you're
yeah.
doing because it's really cool.
Well, I guess this is my second tech company officially. I sort of took a break from tech, from an operating role for a few years, after I left Itron, the acquirer of SmartSync. And, the name of the company is Goodjob, and it's a great business. I'm super excited about it. And we're solving a really big problem that the world faces today, which is trying to figure out who I should hire. There are a lot of people out there in the world today, and you can hire a ton of companies to give you a list or give you resumes or, give you a group of people that, potentially could be good fits in your workforce or at your company. But no one really is telling people, well, who should I hire? And what's the right way to go about assessing someone to see if I should hire them, and if they're, and how likely are they to be successful in my environment. And so we created Goodjob. It's a software as a service business. We use artificial intelligence and a proprietary assessment process that's been around for 38 years that we have modernized. Um, to tell people in an instant whether or not what the probability of success is of someone working in their organization. And we've it's been a
I
lot
can
of
save you
fun.
a lot of money.
Well, listen, it's the cost of a bad hire.
Yeah.
It costs people 5 times their annual salary is what SHRM, the organization, says that is the leading organization in our industry. Costs 5 times a salary. So if you hire somebody for $100,000 and it's the wrong person, it's going to cost you $500,000.
Yeah.
And so what we do is focus on helping companies hire the right people, and we do it with our software, and we try to make it a fun experience for the candidates. And we're experiencing great growth. We're in that grow phase. To be honest with you, we spend a lot of time in the no phase, and we're still learning every day. You don't ever leave that phase,
right.
but we're just now hitting that grow phase and starting to scale, and it's a lot of fun, and I think we'll make a big difference in the world.
That's awesome. Well, and where would somebody, if they wanted to look up Goodjob, where would somebody find you guys?
Yeah, goodjob.io. And of course, because the .com was taken, but it's www. Yeah, goodjob.io, and you can download our mobile app. It's on the App Store and in the Android Google Store. So you can download it and get started, whether if you're a candidate or an employer. Our focus right now, we're bringing on just a great group of employers, and that's growing in a big way. We're in that early adopter phase, and we've just had some awesome success. I've been fortunate enough to hire some really good people that are helping me grow the business.
Yes, you would have to know who to hire, right? If you're helping people select who to hire, then it should be a good formula to use.
Well, I've been tested. I'll tell you, it's most people, not to get too much into it, but I'll tell you this: most people hire on gut, and that's what the research says. That and actually, the research will tell you that 50% of hires are successful and 50% are not. And so we believe if someone just uses our technology to make a decision, that at a minimum we can increase that, in the upper 90% range, or even be right every time. Right. And so anyway, it's a fun. We're having a good time. It's fun to be back in this environment, and we'll see how it plays out.
A good question to always ask yourself in every phase is, am I having fun? And ask yourself the next day if the answer is no that day, because sometimes maybe that not at that moment, but as long as you're having fun and you're helping do something meaningful, I think that's really what matters. So.
Absolutely. And for me, I mean, this business is not just about growing and getting big and doing all those things. I mean, I do feel like we're really making a difference in people's lives. If you help someone find an opportunity where just based on who they are, they're more likely to be successful and have a better life by working in a particular company. You're making them a better husband, you're making them a better friend, you're just making them a better person. Yeah. So they can find their purpose in life. And to me, that's a good reason to grow a company.
That is great. Well, for the audience, you guys look up Goodjob as you recruit and try to find the best people. Stephen, thank you so much for your time. I hope that you enjoyed reminiscing on the SmartSync days. I think it's always good to reflect on successes to inspire other people. So I appreciate your time.
Well, thank you, Laura. Thank you for having me. Once again, I'm honored to be your first guest, and I wish you the best of luck with your new business. You certainly have the tools and capabilities to make it successful. So thank you.